Hello, so I'm a little bit nervous because we've heard some amazing people today. And I'm not a melanoma patient, but I'm here to talk a little bit about the mental health impact of melanoma. And before I start, what I want to say, I think what's been really lovely is the things that I had written, and I was saying to the guys I was speaking to, I had written this before last night. I'm hearing it from yourselves, and it's been really lovely to hear that what I'm experiencing is what you guys are as well. So my name's Clare, as I've said, and as I said, it is my absolute honour and privilege to be here today. I think I've thanked Imogen about 47 times for letting us come along and be a part of this. So I'm speaking today on behalf of the MelanomaMe Foundation. Some of you may know about us, you may not. We are a charity that supports the families and patients of anybody that's been diagnosed with melanoma. We can offer counselling and support and awareness and things as well. So I know a couple of you were talking about that. Feel free to reach out. So I just want to say before I begin, obviously I am going to read because I do like the sound of my own voice, so I know you all want to get home, so we'll read a little bit. I just want to say that some of the content I will be covering might be quite triggering, and I fully understand if anybody does need to leave, put yourself first and I'll completely understand. Preferably if not everybody does, that'd be good, but if you do need to go then don't worry about that. I also just want to mention that I might be talking about client experiences. These are experiences that I've been given explicit permission to share, so I'm not breaking confidentiality or anything. My amazing clients have allowed me to share some of their experiences with you today. So I work as a counsellor at the foundation. I've been there for 2 years. And as all of you with COVID, we've had to adjust and go online and telephone and things like that. And it's been really nice to actually be able to get out and speak to people all over the country and support them as well. So the MelanomaMe Foundation was founded 5 years ago by Kerry Rafferty, following her own melanoma diagnosis. So Kerry would love to have been here today, although she would hate to speak because that's why she asks me to do it. But she couldn't make it. But she has created a video that she'd like me to play for you. So I'm going to play this short video and then you can come back to me.
Hi, my name is Kerry Rafferty and I am the founder of a charity called MelanomaMe Foundation, and we provide psychological support for people who are affected by malignant melanoma. I was also diagnosed myself with malignant melanoma back in 2015. So some of the things I'm going to be talking about today is how people are affected both emotionally and psychologically from malignant melanoma. Many people describe melanoma being the barrier between now and then, and people describe themselves as not being the same person after a melanoma diagnosis. Many people go through an existential crisis, wondering why this has happened to them. It's scary when you're facing your own mortality, and you can feel very alone even though there's so many people around you. We don't want to burden those that we love, so we carry it on our own shoulders. And likewise, they're doing the same. Every lump, a bump that may appear on our skin or within our bodies, we become very fearful that the melanoma's returned. For people who the melanoma has returned, we're facing our own mortality. In all of the after appointments, all the surgical appointments, we relive trauma. We fear the sun, the very thing that gives everything on this planet life. And for many of us, we've had such a wonderful love affair with the sun. The things that we used to enjoy in the sun, such as going to festivals, theme parks, we can't do that now without that additional anxiety and that additional preparation beforehand. And we can move through the phases of grief, such as bargaining. We would do anything to go back in time to change things in some way, to maybe get that mole checked out earlier. And the anger. We're angry with the world, the environment we live in, the stigma around melanoma, the complete lack of understanding, and for lots of people, blame and shame. Diagnosis of any cancer is terrifying, and as a natural response, we tend to adapt a survival instinct approach especially in the early days, and then follows a period of reflection. And it's within these processing moments that the subject of blame and stigma rears its ugly head. 90% of all cases is caused by UV radiation from my. Most other types of cancer rarely invite queries about your behaviour. Did you use sunbeds? Did you tan? And these questions may even be asked upon diagnosis, and so the blame game begins. Processing a cancer diagnosis is difficult enough without the stigma attached to melanoma. If only I knew this when I was younger. If I never stepped on a sunbed, my family wouldn't be going through this. And if I hadn't ignored the mole that was evolving, I wouldn't be in this situation. And these are some of the quotes that we hear very often at MelanomaMe. And these self-blame attacks can really play around in our minds, and they can have a massive impact on our mental health. The truth is that most people don't understand melanoma until you get pushed into that club that you wish you weren't a member of. When there's very little awareness out there, it's very difficult to weigh up the risks based on the evidence available. And I recall my own thought process when attending tanning salons in my younger days. The worst that can happen is skin cancer, and that just gets cut out. Of course, now I'm in the melanoma club, I know differently, but before I joined, I wasn't given the correct information about what the terms of the membership was. There's no huge media campaigns around melanoma. In fact, the only time of year that media becomes interested in skin cancer is in the summer months. But melanoma exists all year round. Over 16,000 people are diagnosed every year. It is essential to be aware of all cancers, but we all know that it's important to get our smears. We've all been told how to check our breasts and testicles. We all know that a continuous cough should be checked out, but it's not widely publicised about skin cancer. The kindest thing that anybody can do for a person with melanoma is to let them know that they aren't alone and that they'll be walked with throughout their journey.
Thank you. So thank you to Kerry for that heartfelt and honest account of a melanoma diagnosis that I'm sure many of you know only too well. So there's one given in life, and that is that one day we will all die. And we know that we have no control over that. And for the most part, we manage to live every day without fear of it happening. When you receive a cancer diagnosis, that all changes and you face your own mortality. Regardless of the staging and the outcome, you've still heard those words, "I'm sorry, it's cancer." So this can cause extreme and uncontrollable anxiety, as well as a loneliness that most have never experienced. Like Kerry mentioned, you begin to ask, why me? What if I hadn't used a sunbed? What if I hadn't got sunburned? Questions you'll never truly have answers to, but ones that almost everyone diagnosed with melanoma will have thought. The truth is that if you had known that this would happen, you probably would have made a different choice. No one can predict that for their future, and we all think it will never happen to us. This is where the blame and shame start to creep in, and people can question, was it my fault? Am I being punished? And they may not seek help for fear of their feeling, they may not seek help for how they're feeling for fear that they'll be judged for their life choices. The reality of that is if you find a great organisation who know about melanoma and where you can access counselling or support, there'll be only love and understanding and absolutely no judgment. No one deserves to have cancer, whatever your life choices have been. So in my time as a counsellor with the charity, I've seen some really similar experiences that clients have had. And often this is the reaction of others around them. So it's often a lack of understanding of the disease, and sometimes it's an ignorance from them to find out more. We know that melanoma is not highly publicised, but it often comes down to those around us trying to protect themselves by playing down the importance of the diagnosis. So I've heard things from clients who've had people say things like, "Oh, it's fine, my friend had skin cancer and they just cut it out, you'll be fine. And just come and sit in the sun, don't be silly, they've taken them all off, you're fine." If it was as easy as that, I wouldn't have a job and we wouldn't need to be here today. Sadly, the reality is that it's not as simple as many of you know. The fear that melanoma will return or the sun anxiety that you develop can be overwhelming and again feel extremely lonely. This can't just disappear overnight. You need unconditional love and support and a reminder that you're not alone on this journey. Some may be here, and it may be your first summer since being diagnosed with melanoma, and you may already feel like your life has changed so much, but I want you to know that with time and the right support, it can get easier and you can get back that control. So what a melanoma patient suffers is a trauma. It's the trauma of a diagnosis, the trauma of a wide local excision, and for many, the trauma of follow-up surgeries and waiting for results. In the counselling room, we see that trauma regularly, and often all that person needs is someone to validate those feelings. And that's a word I've heard a lot over the last 2 days. And tell them that we understand it's not in your head, it is very real, and it's very scary. So once the initial trauma starts to ease, patients can be re-traumatized every summer as they see their friends all over social media showing off their tan they've had, or even worse, the burns that they've got because they forgot to put on cream. It's only by sheer luck that those people don't know the reality of a melanoma diagnosis, and it's you who has to bear the burden of that fear, and it's not fair. So when you're diagnosed with melanoma, like most people, the first stop is Google. We all want to know more, and when we have masses of information at our fingertips, it's hard not to fall into that rabbit hole. This can bring comfort, reading success stories and people who've gone on to live their lives without fear. But then there's the other side, the side that can provide misinformation, fear, and even more confusion. I often compare things you read online to TripAdvisor. Bear with. If you've had a wonderful time on holiday and your hotel, you probably aren't going to spend time writing a review because you're in the moment living your best life. But if it was awful, the first thing you do will be come home and tell the world via TripAdvisor. So the same goes for this. If a person gets a melanoma diagnosis and doesn't feel anxious or scared, and they're early on in the anxious or scared, and they carry on doing the things that they love, they're not going to shout about that on a forum or in a group. If a doctor gets a case of melanoma that does not have complications and is removed, and the person does not get any further melanomas, they might not report that in a medical journal. However, if a person is lonely or scared, or their cancer's come back, they'll naturally reach out to an online community who understand what they're going through. Or if a doctor has a case which is unusual or extreme, they'll write about that, and that's what you see online. So when you're searching for things to make you feel better, this can sometimes cause even more anxiety and stress. This is another time, and we've heard it a lot today, about reaching out to an organisation or someone who can support you and tell you the good stories as well. And I've heard that a lot with people that have heard stories from yourselves that you're sharing, and that gives hope, and it gives people the foresight of what their story could be. So when I asked my clients about some of the hardest parts of living with melanoma, one of them was how they were made to feel at their appointments. Now, I will stress that this is not everybody, but it is enough that they've noticed and wanted me to mention it today to make sure that no one felt like it was just them. So when you're diagnosed, you're told to check your skin regularly and to get anything new or different checked out, and to check your lymph nodes as well, something that most of us have probably never checked before. When clients do this and then report that to their nurses or consultants, they can sometimes be made to feel like they're being a bother to them, or that they're overreacting and they really shouldn't have wasted their time. That's not okay. This can leave the person feeling embarrassed or upset, and worse still, that they just won't ask again, and then that could lead to something not getting checked. The truth is, it might be an overreaction, but until you've been diagnosed with melanoma, you can't have an opinion on how someone should feel when they find a new lump or mole they never noticed before, and suddenly they can't take their eyes off it. What a client needs in that moment is kindness and understanding, and most of all, reassurance. Another common theme for our clients when we asked how they described living with melanoma was fear. That word was used a lot. The fear of a return, fear it could be worse, and the worst fear that they would not be able to fight it, and their children and families would be left without them. Living with that fear, knowing that nothing can take it away, can be overwhelming and feel like a very dark and lonely place. Like Kerry references in her video, there's often the person before melanoma and then the person after. No one really likes change, but have it forced upon you and then coupled with a lack of understanding from people around them can feel too much. In these times, a melanoma patient just needs that understanding again and someone to listen to. however they're feeling, to validate that. I wanted to use this moment to remind anyone feeling this way that you are never alone. Reaching out to an organisation to get the support you deserve is an incredibly brave but important step, and one that will allow you a safe space to talk through and work through any issues that you're facing. So I didn't want today's talk to be totally somber, because in amongst all the darkness, we often can find hope. And there's hope is there to help patients get up every morning and face the day ahead of them. Hope that they will get better, hope that the cancer won't return, hope that one day they won't feel so overwhelming, and hope that one day life will feel normal again. No one can promise any of those things, but to have hope means you are never giving up on that possibility, and that will help you through those tougher days. So Jess actually was talking about this to me last night, and I was like, this is in my talk, she knows. So it's all good, don't worry. Looking at all of the negative things that melanoma has brought into your life is probably fairly easy to list, but it's not as easy to look at the positives from that story. So the biggest thing, and I've seen that this last few days, is finding a new community. A club that most of you never really wanted to be a part of, but now you have these people, you want them in your life forever. But most of all, though, is strength. You might never have had to be strong until this moment, but you are. By fighting this with everything you've got and for getting up each and every day, no matter how you feel, but also for taking those days to rest and saying no to people because you need a day to cry and be angry, that shows strength. It's a strength to be you and to listen to your body. This is where self-care becomes vital. When was the last time you put yourself first? I'm guessing most people in here worry more about how other people feel rather than how they feel. But remember, you can't pour from an empty cup. It's also so important to take even a minute or two from your day to do something from you. Things that I've seen that are beneficial, things like meditation, starting a hobby, walking, or even just a bath or some pampering. Perhaps set yourself a challenge this weekend or do one act of self-care without feeling guilty. Being asked to speak today was a complete privilege, as I say, as being a counsellor to melanoma patients. I hope that what I've covered has helped at least one of you to feel a little less alone and maybe a little less afraid. And wherever you're at on your journey, just know that things can get better with time. And while no one can change the experience you have, we can walk beside you on that journey and support you on every single step. So I wanted to finish with a quote, which is by, it's A.A. Milne, but we'll go with Winnie the Pooh because that's better. We're going to end with a quote, and it is that you are braver than you believe, smarter than you seem, and stronger than you think. Thank you.